Hi, everybody. We're here for part 3 of Empowered Visionary School Leadership series of webinars for you. So welcome back. I hope that part 1 and part 2 have been really helpful, and maybe you've been able to get some practice in and some vision and mission and core values thoughts together. Maybe you've talked with your people. I'm curious about what your superstars have said about your program. But today we're going to talk about growth and what you can do to continue to grow and grow and grow alongside the people that you work with. All right. So, hi, I'm Amy Williams with Amy Williams Academy, and it is my honor to be with you here today. So, thanks for showing up. Okay, so here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk a little bit about the culture of inclusion and the importance of that, and the importance of continuing to check ourselves and check our biases and be mindful and proactive in eliminating obstacles and barriers that maybe we're not aware of. But once we're aware of them, how can we dismantle them? So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about observation and feedback and the importance of giving feedback and to help support a community that is ready to grow and ready to hear hard things and ready to hear not so hard things, celebrations, and what they're doing well. All of that comes together when we're talking about what we observe and what we notice and how we let people know how they're doing and how they can grow and what you could do to support them. Right? So we'll talk about that. And then we'll have some time to dive into retention. How do you keep the people who are doing incredible work and who are connected to their purpose and the work that they do with families and with children and with their colleagues? How do you keep them connected so that they stay and continue to become pillars of your program? So we'll talk about that. And then we'll dive into the nitty-gritty of creating and developing a solid professional development plan for your crew, for your people. What are the skills that are lagging? What are the places where they could come together in maybe mentorship opportunities? What do you have that you can offer? Right. So within your community, there's probably a lot of brilliance that maybe you haven't tapped into yet. So we'll talk about that and kind of the nuts and bolts of that, what needs to be on a certificate, the beginning, the middle, and the end of a PD that is engaging and relevant and, where people don't fall asleep. All right. So we'll talk about that, and that will wrap up this session in this part of our webinar. So let's get going. Let's start with fostering a culture of inclusion. So we know addressing bias and discrimination and becoming more culturally responsive in our classrooms and to the community that we serve. Building in programs that are trauma informed and trauma responsive. That is all important. We could all say, yep, for sure, that. So let's listen a little bit. Just a second, we'll listen to a few people talk about that. But right now, let's pause and just make a commitment that from this point forward, we commit to doing the continuous work on our own hidden bias, our own ways that we miss things, and how are we going to set that up and set ourselves up for success? Who are the people that you could reach out to? What is the work that you are committed to do for your own self and for your own growth, so that you don't have spots that you're not aware of or unexamined areas where your bias shows up, right? So let's take a moment and listen.
This is how
we all have our biases, the set of assumptions that we make, and the things we don't notice about people's race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, appearance, and other traits. They come from the part of our mind that jumps to conclusions that we might not even be aware that we have.
I really can't tell you the number of times people assumed I was the receptionist when I was an executive at the company.
That kind of bias gets in the way of good collaboration, performance, and decision-making.
It creates an invisible tax of resentment and frustration. The more frustrated we are, the more silent we are likely to be. And the more silent we are, the less we may be able to do our best work. The good news, though, is bias is not inevitable. So here's how to disrupt bias in 3 steps. The first step is to create a shared vocabulary. Sometimes bias shows up in big, embarrassing gaffes, but more often it comes out in the little words and phrases we choose, which are packed with assumptions. In meetings, especially, these often go unnoticed, or even worse, people notice, but don't know what to say. That's why we recommend coming up with a shared word or phrase that everyone agrees to use to disrupt bias, attitudes, or behaviors. Examples teams are using are bias alert, stoplight, or even throwing up a peace sign.
Leaders often ask us to give them the right words, but the best words are the ones your team will actually say, not the ones that leaders impose. So talk to your team. My very favorite is the one that you recommended, Trier, purple flag. When someone says or does something biased, we'll say purple flag, and maybe we'll even wave a purple flag. It's not a red flag, it's a friendly purple flag.
It helps us become more aware of our blind spots.
Purple flag.
Purple flag. Thanks for pointing that out. I've been noticing lately I use a lot of sight metaphors that often portray disabilities like being visually impaired in negative ways, but I'm committed to doing better and working on it.
I am too. Another great shared vocabulary trick is to ask members of your team to respond to bias with an I statement. An I statement invites the other person in to understand things from your perspective rather than calling them out. Like, I don't think you're going to take me seriously when you're calling me honey, or I don't think you meant that the way that it sounded. Usually, when people's biases are pointed out to them clearly and compassionately, they apologize and correct things going forward. Usually, but not always.
That brings us to the second step. Create a shared norm for how to respond when your bias is pointed out.
When my bias is flagged, I can only be glad that I'm learning something new if I can move past the shame. I hate the idea that I've harmed someone. And when I feel ashamed, I rarely respond well. So it's really helpful to have that shared norm so that I know what to say in those moments.
We recommend you start with, thank you for pointing that out. It took courage for that person to disrupt the bias. So it's important to acknowledge that. Then there are 2 choices on what to say next. 1, I get it, or 2, I don't get it. Could you explain more after the meeting?
The other day, you and I were recording a podcast, and I said HR serves 3 masters, and you waved the purple flag. I knew what I had done wrong. Why was I using a slavery metaphor? We hit pause, I thanked you, and we re-recorded. It was no big deal. The thing I love about the purple flag is how efficient it is.
Flagging the bias didn't prevent us from getting the work done. In fact, it helps us work together more honestly.
It's even harder when I don't know what I did wrong. Once I asked someone out to lunch. Out came the purple flag. I had no idea why. So I was relieved to know what to say next. Thank you for pointing it out, but I don't get it. Could we talk after the meeting? Afterwards, the person reminded me that they were fasting for Ramadan. It instantly made sense to me, and I discovered something that I could be more aware of. But to get to awareness, I had to move through shame. It was hard to say, I don't get it. The shared norm helped me listen and learn rather than getting defensive. The fact that there was a norm at all reassured me that other people are making similar kinds of mistakes and that we're all learning together.
Disrupting bias may start off feeling uncomfortable, but with time and consistency, we can build the stamina we need to push through it. When it becomes routine for us to notice our biases, all of a sudden they feel less threatening. It's hard to break bias habits, yet we can change the pattern with consistent effort.
We've got to be patient with ourselves and with others.
Patient and also persistent.
Yeah.
Which brings us to our last step. Once a team has come up with a shared vocabulary and agrees on the shared norm for how to respond, the team should commit to disrupting bias at least once in every meeting.
If bias isn't flagged in a meeting, it doesn't mean there wasn't any bias. It just means either nobody noticed or nobody knew what to say. When we are silent about bias, we reinforce it. And it can't be just the targets of bias who point it out. Observers and leaders have got to speak up. We all have a responsibility.
By making a practice of disrupting bias quickly and kindly, we prevent it from metastasizing into something worse, like prejudice, bullying, discrimination, or harassment.
Bias disruptors, a shared vocabulary, a shared norm, and a shared commitment ensure that we notice and learn from the mistakes that we are all making so that we can work better together.
When we collaborate, we use our full capacity as humans to get more done collectively than we could ever dream of accomplishing as individuals. So let's stop letting bias get in the way.
We all,
Okay, how about that? Let's see, I'm gonna get back to what we were working on. Okay, there we go. So I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. But since I'm not with you in person right now, or we're not in a together kind of forum, let's take this opportunity to pause and to write. What are your thoughts? What are you feeling? What are you thinking about right now? How might you introduce something like this to your team? What kind of shared vocabulary could you anticipate? Do you anticipate resistance to this? Do you see that people in your community will say, "Yay, hooray! I've been wanting to do this for a long time." So take a pause and write in your workbook. So I'll be here for a little bit, and when you're ready to start back again, after you hit the pause button, do your writing, and when you're ready, hit play again, and we'll carry on. Okay, and we're back. So take a deep breath. Okay, so we've gotten some thoughts down on paper, how we plan to disrupt bias in our gatherings and our meetings, and now it's time to take a look at, as a leader of my program, part of our responsibility as leaders is to check in on our policies, on our processes, the way that we recruit and hire, the way that we give feedback, the way that we connect with families for the enrollment process. If we take a look at those types of processes with a lens of, can I do better? Is there something hidden in here, unintended, nevertheless shows and reinforces some sort of bias or a hidden obstacle that you may not be aware that you have in place? So it's time to take a look at your policies, like from the very beginning to the very end. So get your employee handbook out, get your family handbook out, take a look at your enrollment processes, what you're asking families to do to have their child join your program. What are your ways that you meet with families and talk with them about what's happening in the classroom? Those family teacher conferences can be really important places to look to make sure that we are doing the best that we can and eliminating barriers as much as possible. Okay, so if you want to pause right now and just set yourself a plan, I'm going to look at my employee handbook by this date, my family handbook by this date, my enrollment process by this date, and just put it down. Make a date. Make a date with yourself where you get a cup of coffee and you've got your handbooks out and you settle in and you just take a look at it from the eyes of the community that you want to have join your program. Is there a place where you could shift and change? Right? Okay. And that takes vulnerability, it takes courage, and it takes time and the willingness to make a mistake and say to others, thank you for pointing that out. I get it, or I don't get it. Can we talk more about that? Who are the people that you surround yourself with who will let you know? Are there barriers in each of those places, in the processes, right? The processes from the beginning to the end. What are those barriers, and what are your thoughts about shifting them, getting rid of those barriers? How might you communicate those to your community? What's your timeline for putting into practice once you see what the barriers are? What's your plan? Okay. So now it's time to pause and write again. So we're going to do it. We're going to write down the dates. When are you going to look at that employee handbook? When are you going to look at your family handbook? Re-enrollment materials, enrollment materials. How about your website, right? There's so many areas that deserve our attention in regards to hidden bias and barriers that might be in the way for everybody to have access to the program that you offer, right? So take another pause, get a drink of water, and when you're ready, come on back. Okay, we're back, so take a deep breath. Stretch your shoulders if you haven't done that in a little while, and let's carry on. So now let's move into coaching. Observation, assessments. How do you notice how your program's doing? What's happening day to day in the classroom, campus-wide, with your families? What's your plan now? And let's consider some important things to remember going forward. Now, here are some words that you can use that transform the coaching feedback. So you have someone that you on your team that you want to have a conversation with and do some coaching. You see that there's a place to grow. There are also places to celebrate as well. But here are some words that you can have in your pocket to use when you need them. So first one is, I'm giving you these comments because I have very high expectations, and I'm confident that you can reach them, right? That instills that you believe in their capability. You believe that they are smart and heart-centered and ready to do and grow and become better and better in the work that they do, right? Another phrase that you can use is, I'm here to coach you and I'm here to help you meet those, right? So that extends a partnership and an agreement that you're not here by yourself, you're not in trouble. Let's work together to find ways that we can grow together. And my role as a coach is to show up and be that person alongside you. Okay, as we enter into those coaching relationships, you probably recognize these phrases: growth mindset and fixed mindset. We know about that in the classroom, right? We want to foster growth mindset for our children. Cool, we got that. So how does that relate to our relationship and our coaching conversations with the people that we lead, with the adults and the families that we lead, right? So growth mindset, just to remind us all, is this: I can learn anything I want to. When I'm frustrated, I can persevere. I want to challenge myself. When I fail, I learn. Tell me I try hard. If you succeed, I'm inspired. My effort and attitude determine everything. So that's growth mindset. One way to look at growth mindset. And then let's look at fixed mindset, which is different. And it goes a little like this: I am either good at it or I'm not. When I'm frustrated, I give up. I really don't like to be challenged. And honestly, who does? So whether you like it or not, are you up for challenge? Are you ready for that? There are some times in our lives when we're at a place where we might say, okay, I could take a little bit of challenge, but not a huge chunk of challenge. So that's where we as coaches can show up and say, okay, friend, we've got big challenge here. We got this. So we're going to take it in bite-sized portions, right? And see what we can do to get to that end goal by taking the steps that are necessary to reach that end goal. So you don't have to take a big bite of that hamburger. You could take little bites and enjoy the bites along the way, right? Not sure where that metaphor came from. Okay, so next, the idea around another idea that's coming from a fixed mindset headspace is this: when I fail, I'm no good, I give up. Next, tell me I'm smart. I need you to tell me that I'm smart, right? Different from growth mindset, right? Okay, next, if you succeed, I feel threatened. I don't want you to get any better, any faster than me. Let us just kind of stay together, right? Next, my abilities determine everything, not necessarily my effort and attitude, but my abilities determine my worth and my confidence, right? Now, if that's the only place where you're gaining confidence or feeling solid and proud of your work, right, is about your abilities, then let's open up a little bit and think about, how did you get to those abilities? How did you where did the effort happen so that you could become an expert person? You can help every child fall asleep in the nap room. Think back at the time when it may have been a disaster and you didn't have that skill yet, right? You had to growth mindset into your abilities, right? So keep that in mind as you move forward in coaching conversations with the people that you serve. How did they get to the place where their strengths are shining, right? And when you can determine and kind of point out, I had to fall off my bike a bunch before I figured out how to ride my bike, right? And now you can ride your bike. But there was a time when you didn't know how, right? So those are my thoughts about that. Okay, now, remember this? You might recall this slide from earlier. But F. Scott Fitzgerald said this: "I don't want just words. If that's all you have for me, you'd better go." Okay, so let's remember that. Think about a time when maybe you had a boss or a supervisor who gave you feedback and it was just that. They would come in, sit in your classroom, observe, tell you what all you did wrong, maybe some things that they noticed that were right. That's great. And then poof, they were gone. How often did you see that person in leadership role model what it was that you wanted to see, right? I'm thinking of a time when I had someone come in as an observer in my classroom, and it was so powerful because I was nervous. This person had to me, had a great amount of power and influence and so brilliant. I was nervous. I didn't want this person to see me fail. I wanted all my children to behave, and I wanted everybody to be actively learning and be happiness. I had an ideal, and that wasn't happening. Isn't that always the case? No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, in this particular circumstance, when this observer came in and things were starting to get really struggly, this observer made eye contact with me and said, "May I have a turn?" And I was like, yes. So we want to tread carefully when we're in an observer role. Do we step into coaching mode or do we remain observer? So that's a kind of conversation to have with the people that you're coaching or observing in their classroom. That's a conversation to have beforehand, right? So if you know you're going in for a particular struggle, they're having a hard time helping a child who is really having some behavior issues or are struggling with speech or whatever it is, they might call you in for specifically to observe a particular thing or a particular time of day, right? So beforehand, ask, do you want me to just straight up observe? Or if I have an idea, would you like me to step in? So that's a conversation to have ahead of time. And as the person coming in as observer / coach / role model, it's important to determine that ahead of time and to make sure that you know the context already. Have you been in there enough to know the vibe, to know what's happening regularly, right? It's great if you are in a co-teaching relationship or you're a head teacher and you're helping an assistant teacher who is still learning and growing how to do things like run a gathering or lead a small circle while you're getting lunch set up, right? So ask, may I have a turn? Or would you like some help? And sometimes you can make that agreement ahead of time and you have a signal, like maybe it's this, which means, do you want some help? Because it could be that other person knows that the struggle is important and I just, no, I got this. And then let the struggle happen so they could see themselves transform from a place of difficulty to a place of, okay, I did it. Success. Everybody's good. And now I need a break, right? Okay, so back to role modeling. If you've made that agreement, you have the context, you're pretty clear about what's happened before and kind of what the pattern is, and it's appropriate for you to step in and role model, then do that thing. Role model what it is that you want to see. Okay, backing up to my story, the person who was coming in to help. And yes, this person asked if they could have a turn. And I thought to myself, I had mixed feelings. I was embarrassed because this person saw my classroom in my eyes completely falling apart. It wasn't really, but I felt like it was because, I wanted everything to be perfect, which is never going to happen. So I said, sure, of course. I was also grateful. I wanted to see how you do this thing because I know you're going to be brilliant at it. So I had expectations too, right? So this person stepped in and led a gathering, and she began with a rhythm, something with her hands. And the children began to focus and do a call and response kind of rhythmic thing. She started with her hands, and then she went on to her voice in a call and response kind of way. Then she began to sing a song about how we can sit in the gathering, and that she was about to read a book. So she was making up a song about what was happening and what was about to happen on the spot. So here I was on the outside looking in. I'm totally stealing that. That's exactly what I was thinking to myself. So that's an example of how role modeling can give a person ideas on one way or two ways or a few ways to try it tomorrow, or try in your own way, in that same way, for success, right? So remember, role model what you want to see. Now, you role model in the classroom if you're given feedback about classroom processes or management, all that kind of stuff. But beyond a classroom, how do you role model growth mindset? How do you role model kindness? Dip back into your core values and your vision and your mission. How are you role modeling and showing up in that space day to day? All right, deep breath. All right, now it's time to talk about staff development. Okay, so you've done some observations, you've given a little bit of feedback. So now maybe you have a finger on the pulse of some places where we might want to grow. Okay, so staff development comes to mind. Most programs have requirements of how many hours of professional development that are necessary per year for your program licensing, right? So you have requirements probably, and maybe regardless of the requirements, you see a place where your team can learn and grow, right? So understanding and guiding that professional development is important, right? Evals, feedback, right? So let's start with that observation for existing teams. What do you do now? How often do you step into classrooms or step into spaces or periods of the day that might be more difficult than others, right? So what do you do now? What are you looking for? And what are your curiosities, right? So are you there at arrival time? Are you there during the transition from recess to nap time, or from lunch to outdoors, or at dismissal time? Where are the times of day where your team would appreciate some observation and some feedback so that things can flow more smoothly and they can grow and become more successful? Okay, so what is it that you do now? How often do you do it, right? And what are you looking for, right? What are your curiosities? So let's pause right now and write. And I encourage everybody to really honestly take a look. How often do you find yourself sitting in an observer's chair in a classroom, or finding time to be out on the playground, or at arrival or dismissal, right? As a leader, you might be a leader who is also a teacher, right? So that can offer its own set of struggle, because you're teaching, you're on in a teacher way for your day, right? I wonder what it would look like if for periods during the day you gave yourself permission and kind of like a task for yourself that every single day you're going to sit for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes in observation mode, right? What would that look like? I knew a teacher once who was trying to figure out, okay, I'm not sure what is happening during this time of day, but everything's going sideways, and they couldn't put their finger on why is everything going sideways? What's going on? So she found a piece of red felt. I'm looking around to see if I have something, but no. She had a piece of red felt and would play. First of all, she let children know what she was doing, right? So, hey, everybody, here's my piece of red felt. When I put this on my shoulder, that means I'm not available, right? I'm not available to give a lesson. I'm not available to get you your polish. I'm not available to, whatever. If there's a safety thing, absolutely, you're going to step in. But she began to do this during that particularly hard time of day. She'd put the red on and sit in her chair and observe, right? Unless something was going to be a safety hazard, spills would happen, but as an observer, she let that happen and observed, right? So she began this practice and she gave herself, okay, I'm just going to do it for 2 minutes. And she watched the clock. Okay, how long could I do it? Because she was kind of wrestling with her impulse and her desire to step in and manage, right? Well, she noticed from her observation and pulling back to observe, she had maybe I'm the problem. I'm stepping in to fix everything instead of allowing the children to right to themselves, to clean up that spill, to resolve that conflict, right? Interesting. So that became a practice for this particular teacher, that every day she had that red felt swatch of fabric on her shoulder at some period during the day. Now, she let the children know ahead of time what it was. She had a co-teacher who knew it, who knew what it was. And they actually, as co-teachers, would take turns, because co-teachers like, that's a great idea, I want to do that. And so he did the same thing. Their agreement was, if I have the red felt on, you can't have it on at the same time. So we can't both be doing it at the same time. So they came up with an agreement that worked for them. Right? So maybe you can do that too. Okay, that was a little rabbit trail I hadn't intended to go on, so we're back. Now it's time to pause and to write. I hope you've got your workbook close by and your favorite pens, and I'll be here when you're ready. Just push play again and we'll carry on. Okay, we're back. So give yourself a stretch. If you haven't stretched in a little while, do that. And I'm going to join you and do it. This is important. Okay, so we've stretched and we're ready. Now, here is a tool that I'm so excited to share with you. This is a tool that I learned, 20 years ago. It's from Quint Studer's work, and Quint Studer wrote a book called, it just flew out of my head. I'll put it in the resources for you. However, Quint Studer wrote a book about excellence, hardwiring excellence, that's it. And it was about excellence in the workplace. Now, Quint Studer was coming from a place of healthcare organizations, right? He worked with, I think it was Southern Baptist hospitals in the Southeast, and came up with lots of tools to increase the excellence, increase kindness, increase efficiency and effectiveness in serving people at their most vulnerable, okay? And we're serving children, we're serving families and communities at their most vulnerable too, right? So, makes sense. So this particular tool is one of many that I learned through that work, right? And the tool is called rounding, right? So it goes a little something like this. So rounding is when you have regular conversations with people that you work with that have a very particular series of questions, so that when you round over and over again with different people, they know what's coming up. So if you've rounded with Ellie before, and excuse me, it's time to round again with Ellie, Ellie knows what those questions are and can come prepared, right? So rounding goes like this. You set aside 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I've had roundings that went longer than that, and I've had roundings that were less than 5 minutes, right? So you can round with the colleagues that you work with, the team you support. Rounding with families is really helpful. Over time, you can begin to see patterns and see, oh, is there a common theme? Maybe this is where I can turn my attention, right? So rounding is helpful to look for themes, to look for patterns, and to get a beat on what's the temperature, right? What's happening? What's working well? What's not working so great? And who's doing an incredible job that maybe you might not be aware of? Okay. So the questions go like this, right? It starts with the question, what is going well? And you start with that question for several reasons. One is to set the tone, right? So if you have somebody that you're rounding with who may tend to be a little grumpy or has a difficult time figuring out what's going well, setting the tone with, okay, let's figure out what's working well, one, so we don't change it and that we keep that going, and we're setting up our conversation for the next 5 minutes or 10 minutes to be solution oriented, right? So what is going well? Always the first question. The next question is, do you have what you need to do your best work? You put the question out there and then get quiet, right? What do they need to do their best work? Is it to, the paper cutter is really dull and we're ruining a whole lot of paper by, the paper cutter that's dull and it's shredding up the paper, we're wasting paper. Sometimes a $10 fix, take the paper cutter to the sharpener, get it sharpened, bring it back, and you will have made that person's day or week or month, right? So do you have what you need to do your best work? And it could be something as simple as the paper sharpener or paper cutter, or it could be something that's bigger too, right? So be ready for that. Now, the next one is, do you have any ideas for improvement, right? Here is where you can get specific. So it might be ideas for improvement around arrival time or dismissal time or playground behaviors or upcoming professional development opportunities, right? So you can get specific about what you want to know about or leave it open-ended. Do you have any ideas for improvement, right? This is a really great question to ask people who are new to your school, to your program. Maybe they've been working there 30 days, 60 days, and you can ask for ideas for improvement informed by other places where they worked, right? Like, oh, I remember rounding with someone who was new to our program and who had worked at several other schools, and this person had the best idea about dismissal. It shifted our processes because it's like, oh my gosh, we never thought about that. Brilliant. And so that taps into the brilliance of somebody who's brand new with a fresh perspective that maybe you haven't thought about before, right? Okay, so that's the third question. The fourth question is there anything I can do to better support your work? That's a vulnerable ask. Got to have some courage to ask that question. And you've also got to have a culture that you've worked on cultivating so that people feel safe enough to tell you, is there anything that I could do as your supervisor, as your leader, as your boss, whatever you call yourself, to better support your work? And the follow-up question is, what would support look like, is such an important one, right? I might have said that in an earlier webinar. The difference between saying, what does support look like versus how can I support you? Then it's subtle, but it shifts the ask, right? What does it look like? What does support look like? I might have an idea what support looks like, and I might just miss the mark because I didn't ask. what does support look like to you, right? Okay, following that, number 5, you end on gratitude. You end on recognition, on a big thank you. Who is it that deserves some sort of appreciation or recognition, right? Is there somebody doing a job that is just knocking your socks off and you'd like to highlight or spotlight, right? So as that person answers this question, little tip, little thought bubble tip. The way that I did it and the way that I talk to school leaders about doing that is on your desk or wherever you are having this conversation, you've got beside you a straight up, for real thank you card that either you made by folding construction paper in half or maybe you bought. There are lots of really beautiful ones out there, but a real thank you note and a real pen, different from a thank you email, different. So I recommend the real note that you actually put the real address on and a stamp, and you put it in the mailbox so that they receive it at their house, right? Okay, so who deserves some sort of recognition? As they're telling you, you're nodding, and then you put pen to paper and put, "Dear Marissa." That gives that person proof, if you will, to your commitment that you are going to follow up and actually thank this person in a real way, right? Sometimes when I've rounded, I've had people say, "Oh, can I write something too?" Sure, and it's a note from both of us. Or, "Hey, I think everybody deserves recognition because we just came off a really hard week of summer camp and everybody's exhausted, but we're still here. Nobody called out." So we're doing really great. I think we need chips and salsa. Right on. So sometimes the who deserves some sort of recognition or appreciation is everyone, right? So with the person that you're rounding, you can come up with, okay, what could that look like, right? So to this person, it looked like chips and salsa. So an easy fix to go to the store, have chips and salsa the next day with a note that says, "Sandy and I appreciate and recognize and notice that everybody's working really hard. Enjoy some chips and salsa." So that's a small thing. And you may know how I feel about, okay, what is the language of the currency of people, and where and when is the time to do a little more than just chips and salsa, right? We can talk more about that later. So that's rounding, like basic rounding, okay? There are other questions that you can add depending on if it's a brand new person coming in or if it's a family member. I've also rounded with students. I'm telling you, asking a 4-year-old ideas for improvement will just get your heart. It will also get your heart when you ask them about who they would like to extend gratitude for, who deserves some sort of recognition. Precious. So you can round with children too. Okay, so let's pause and write right now. Bonus extra credit if you want to pause and go and round with somebody right now. So in your workbook, you'll have a rounding template, and it's just a 1-pager with blanks that you can fill in the blanks, right? Some school leaders have taken this like to the extreme, and they've created a spreadsheet so that they can watch patterns and make sure that they follow up, like thank you note written and delivered and mailed, check, done. So there's not any hanging out pieces that they forget to follow up about, right? So find your way to follow up on what you hear from roundings, right? Now, I've had some feedback from folks who haven't done rounding before, but they heard about it and they were going to try it, and they were nervous about, I'm already doing so much. Is rounding going to add to my list of things to do? Well, it could if you let it, right? When you are in a conversation and someone has an idea for improvement or a way that you could support their work better, in that conversation, you can come up with a way that is doable for you realistically, right? Right? Sometimes there is some additional work to do. That's one of the reasons that you're rounding, is to find out, is my energy and my work going in the right direction to be the support that works for you and for the team, right? Okay, time for me to be quiet. So feel free, if you want to go and round with somebody right now, yeah, do it. Otherwise, write down, what do you think about this? Who are the people you're going to round with first, right? I do recommend that when you start rounding, you let everybody know what it is that you're doing. So you could say, hey, I took this webinar with Amy Williams. We talked about rounding. Here's what rounding is. And who wants to go first, right? So give some context about what it is that you're doing so they can expect to be invited in for a rounding. Remember, you can give permission and an invitation for them to request a rounding too, right? I've had folks who work with me who asked if they could round with me. And I thought, yeah, I've got lots of ideas, right? So think about that too. So I'm going to be quiet, pause a minute, pause the recording, and do your writing, and we'll carry on when you're ready. Okay. So here is some remembers for us, okay? One, when you're coaching with people, when you're working with people, it's important to set goals, yeah? Big question, do they have what they need to do their jobs? Do they have what they need to reach the goals that they set? Next, recap what you heard. Ask for clarification, right? If there's something that's kind of shrouded in mystery, get curious, lean in, tell me more. I don't get it. Help me understand, like that. And is there anything else that you've had the idea like, oh, this is an important thing to remember when I'm rounding with people? When's the best time to do that, right? Now, when you're rounding, I let you know that there were some variations on a theme, if you will, of different questions to ask at different times. Folks who were new to the organization or your program, people who are doing a job that you really want them to stick around and keep doing that job. So that is re-recruiting your best. So what are some questions that you can ask those people in particular? And here it is. Now, again, this is one where you really have to step into courage because they will probably tell you, okay? So the question is, what keeps you here and what would lure you away? And be ready for that answer. What is it that keeps you here, right? In my experience, overwhelmingly, when I ask this re-recruitment question, what kept people there were the relationships, right? The relationships with their colleagues, the relationships with families, the relationship with the leadership, right? That is typically what keeps people there, right? Did I say children? The children keep them there too, yeah. And what would lure you away? That's a big question. And you're inviting them to be vulnerable and courageous as well, right? It's important to know that if you're hearing over and over again, opportunity to grow, place to be promoted to, more money, more time off, more flexibility, a deeper connection to my purpose, those kinds of answers let you know, is this a place where I could meet that, right? Is there a place for this person to grow that maybe they don't know about? What about connecting to purpose? So that can give you ideas of what you could do to re-recruit them, right? They want more professional development around children with disabilities, right? Maybe that's where you turn your attention and your PD budget toward, so that person can get what it is that they're looking for, and they might be looking elsewhere for. Okay, now those are like your superstars. Now, everybody has on our team, you have the folks who are doing work that's just knocking everybody's socks off. And then there are folks who come in, They're there on time, they do their job, they leave on time, right? But their work just seems to be like, I call it meh. They're fine, right? They're not stellar and they're not on a work plan, but they're consistent, right? Wonder what it would look like if they were re-inspired. So think about those people on your team who you think might need a little shot of inspiration, right? A little oomph, a little fanning the flame of what they get excited about, what they feel passionate about, what they feel is deeply connected to their purposeful work. What is that? So here's the question to add to the rounding for folks who may need a little more, some re-inspiration. And that question is, what would make your job more inspiring or fulfilling or joy-giving? And then be quiet, listen. What would they have to say? And is that something that's possible? Can you work together to make it possible, right? How could they contribute to finding that inspiration, to finding that fulfillment, that joy within their work? So this is a place where you can work together, right? So yeah, the question to re-inspire. Now, when we get to the part of rounding when you're talking about who deserves recognition, let's talk a little bit about the difference between recognition and appreciation, okay? Because there's a little bit of a difference, so let's talk about it. So get this, most teams focus on recognition and think that people feel appreciated when they're recognized. Okay, well, however, recognition places the emphasis on the performance and uses words of affirmation or tangible gifts as their methods, right? Think love languages, right? So, so in thinking of love languages, you want to consider all of them because you may be missing so many of your employees, of the people on your team, when you just focus on the thank you notes, the words of affirmation, or the chips and salsa, or the coffee mug on their birthday, right? How could you do it differently? That shows that you want to show appreciation. I notice your work, and here is a token of my appreciation, whether it be a note or a coffee cup or an extra break or coming in to help them clean out their closet. I'm thinking acts of service, right? Quality time. Think of all of those languages of appreciation in the workplace. You probably know about love languages. Well, there is language of appreciation in the workplace, variation on that theme. So check it out and see, I wonder what is the language of appreciation on my team? And ask, right? That's a great question to ask during orientation when they first begin. What is your language of appreciation? This, or this. Then okay, got it. If it's food, what's your favorite food? What's your favorite restaurant? Right. So to carry on about the difference between recognition and appreciation, let's look at this. Recognition tends to be more top-down and can often become routine, right? Like every staff meeting, there's somebody who gets recognition for, their best attendance or this or that or the other. They get some sort of recognition from leadership to them, right? So that's recognition, tends to be more top-down and becomes routine, can easily slip into inauthenticity and can lose its power and its meaning, right? So appreciation, on the other hand, focuses on the person. What did I notice? What talent do you bring to the table? Do you bring to your work day to day? I notice that and I appreciate that. I notice your calm demeanor when that particular child was falling apart in front of you. I notice that. I so appreciate that. This is how it has an impact on our work. This is how it fulfills and kind of shines a light on our core values or our mission or our vision, right? Okay, moving on. This particular person may not performing at their peak for lots of different reasons because life, right? But when you express interest in them as a person, you're curious and you notice and you recognize, right? They're motivated to become more and to turn more of their fullness into their work, right? If they're noticed, if they're recognized. Or I'm thinking of a quote, Toni Morrison, and usually I use this quote when I'm talking about connecting at neutral times with children and the power about that. So when we're talking about that, Toni Morrison says, do your eyes light up when they enter the room, your child or anybody else's child? That's what we're looking for, right? So think about us, because we're humans. We may not be children, but we're adults, and it still feels really good to be noticed. And to, I don't need a rah-rah party for showing up for my job on time, but I'd like for someone to notice that I'm dedicated to being on time, right? I don't need a party. I don't need a big thank you note, but it would be helpful and feel really good for somebody to say, I noticed that and I appreciate that. Thank you. A sincere thank you, right? So when people feel seen and heard, they tend to step in with their full self, okay? Now this leads into the next one. Remember, people, we all have feelings and frustrations, desires and dreams. Do you know that about the people that you work with? Can you tell? Do you ask? Are you interested in how they're feeling right now? Right? In the moment when things are going sideways in their classroom, what are they experiencing? In the moments when things are going really well, and maybe it's their Friday dance party and you see joy across their face, do you recognize that as well, right? What is it that they hope for? What is their vision for their own future? Do you know that, right? And maybe how the school can be a part of that. Okay. When people feel appreciated and noticed, they want to be part of the team, right? That sense of belonging and, hey, this is where my people are. They recognize me. I belong here, right? That's a basic human need. And we as a leader can help support that need being met by creating a place of belonging and recognizing when people show up and do their best work. Okay, so it's time for pause. So take a moment, get into your workbook, and you'll see some writing prompts there. So I'll be quiet for, well, you just hit pause and come on back when you're ready and we'll keep going, okay? Maybe you write a thank you note right now. How about that? And we're back, so green. All right, now it's time to turn to retention. So we've rounded with people, we've written thank you notes, we've done all the things. Now let's really turn our focus on training, right? So we've talked about attracting, we've talked about engaging, and now let's talk about training, right? One of the important components of retention, right? So train, you want to value growth, invest your time and your money here would be my recommendation. So check it out. And leadership is also a part, but now we're going to really turn our attention to the training, right? So think, what skills could my team use some development in, right? There are hard skills and human skills, right? So as you're observing, as you're giving feedback, as you're coaching, you'll begin to notice, I'm noticing a pattern, or I'm noticing a similarity across my team that maybe we all need some of these hard skills around maybe curriculum development or classroom setup or lesson giving or lessons in general. So you may have a list of, okay, here's some places where we can grow and develop in these areas. These are your hard skills. And then there are the human skills. not soft skills, they're human skills, right? And these are the skills of how to listen, how to have a difficult conversation, how to give and receive feedback, how to have an effective confrontation and get to resolution, right? Sometimes the human skills we're less inclined to lean into because of our own trepidation and maybe our own nervousness about, right? Hard skills, I can show, I can teach, I can give evidence about classroom setup, material making for the classroom, giving a lesson, easy peasy, right? Okay. Now, the human skills tend to engage our heart more, and and it calls for vulnerability and courage to teach these human skills, right? So sometimes we may shy away from them, or let the struggle of not having these skills escalate to where your team is having a big issue with conflict resolution, and then you call in me or you call in a consultant to help resolve this big conflict, right? Instead of noticing that there's a need for that skill and teaching into that need early on, right? Okay. So while we're talking about that, you may have had an idea of, oh yeah, we have that need in my program. So we need to build some PD around that. So let's use this time and actually do it, right? Get it done, right? This is set 3, you guys. So I want you to leave here with, work that you've already done and you don't have a whole list of things to do later. So right here, right now is where we're going to do it, okay? So we're going to build some. Consider these questions. 1, what topics are on your mind right now? Are there hard skills or soft skills that your team needs, right? What skills are lacking, right? Is there something in particular? Are you noticing a theme noticing a theme in maybe throughout your rounding or through your observations, right? What skills can you tighten up? Can you teach into? And then next, what are they interested in? What do they want to learn? Follow-up question is, how do you find out? You ask, what do you want to learn more about? What do you wish you knew, right? Next, what does your program need, right? So here are questions to consider. And then we're gonna build the bones of a professional development experience that you can create and you can lead for your people. Now, as we're building, feel free to pause if you need to and go back to those questions if you'd like. But carrying on, when you're building professional development, here are some things to ask yourself. I would recommend asking yourself as you're building it rather than build it and then go back, right? So ask the question, is this engaging? Is this something that I would like to go to? Is this a training that I would find interesting, right? Am I given a voice? Am I actively engaged, invited to participate in the process of learning? Or am I sitting back just listening, right? So 1, is it engaging? How do you engage people, right? By asking specific questions, by getting people to talk with each other. Is there an experience or some sort of activity that drives home the point that you want to make? That's where we get to be creative, right? Okay, so is it engaging? Question 1. Question 2, is it relevant? Does it make sense for your team right here, right now, right? For example, at the beginning of a new school year, it might be useful to do professional development on building relationships with new families and new children, right? That seems to be timely, right? And relevant to what families and staff and children might be experiencing at that particular time of year, right? So that's the relevance and the timeliness of it. Is it timely? And the next one, is it the right length, right? So often, you guys, I teach classes in the evenings, And it can be brutal if your audience has been working all day, and maybe they opened up their school at 6:30 a.m. and then my class begins at 6 p.m. and it goes for 3 hours. So that's a long time, right? Is it the right length? Might it be more engaging if it were maybe 1 hour over a period of days, or 1.5 hours, right? So think about when you're developing your PD, is this a 1 hour experience? Is this 2 hour where you can dive a little deeper, and 3 hours when you can get more into the depth of the work and the material that you want to cover, right? So consider, when are you going to offer a 1 hour, a 2 hour, or a 3 hour experience, right? And then a final question to consider is, what is the follow-up, right? So if, for example, you do professional development and you invited people to set goals and you're going to work on this thing and you're going to try this in your classroom, great, cool. So when are you going to do that, and what does follow-up look like? Right? So maybe you turn to your partner, or you write it down for yourself, or actually set an alarm on your phone to ask yourself, hey, did you do that thing? Did you make that phone call? Did you write up that that report or that narrative, right? Following up can be so important, right? Think about all the handouts that we've gotten from professional developments over the years. What happens to them? Often they end up on a stack, maybe on the dining room table, or maybe the kitchen table, or on your desk, or somewhere. And then a week or two goes by and you're going, oh yeah, I ought to do that thing. I'm going to do that thing. Yeah, it was a great class and I'm going to do that. And then a week goes by and then you go to another training, and the handouts from that training go right on top of that. And then maybe a catalog from LL Bean comes in and maybe it sits on top. And then you got a whole stack of stuff. And when you finally go through it, you pull out handouts and go, oh yeah, I was going to do this 6 months ago. We've all been there. I still have a stack that's kind of like that. We're all working, we're all growing, right? So what is the follow-up? And as a leader of professional development, can you build into your professional development experience some sort of self-guided follow-up? Or you can ask, what does follow-up look like? Kind of like, what does support look like? Why not ask, what does follow-up look like? I'd be curious to hear what people would say, right? Follow-up looks like, in 1 week, you leave a sticky note on my phone in the morning that says, did you make that phone call? And that's all you need to do. Then what I do, go right to my calendar, write sticky note for Andrea on Monday, right? That's how we can help each other. All right, carry on. So let's do the pause right now and write about it. So what might be the bones of your professional development? What topics are on your mind? What skills might be lagging on your team? What is it that they're interested in learning? Do you know? Have you asked? What will you ask? When will you ask? And what does your program overall need, right? Then what are you going to do to make it engaging? Is it relevant? Is this the right time for it? Is this a 1 hour? Is this 2 hours? Is this 3? Is this a full day? Is this a series over the entire year? And what does follow-up look like? So hit the pause button, write your writing, and come on back when you're ready. And that was a lot. I'm so curious. I so wish I could see what you guys are coming up with. Please feel free to email me and let me know. I'd be so curious. Okay, so now for more of the nuts and bolts. Okay, so what goes on a certificate? Now this is for Oregon. I'm sure that every state has its own requirements. So if you are outside of Oregon, please reach out to your licensing organization to find out about this. What is required to be on a certificate so that it counts toward their professional development requirement, okay? But in Oregon, this is what you need. And in many other states, it's very similar, plus or minus something or other. So check in with your own state to confirm what your state requires. But on a certificate, here you go, this is what you need. I recommend creating, if you're going to make some professional development in your school or in your program, make a template in Google Docs or on Canva. Canva is a great place to make something that looks beautiful and that's easily, you can replicate it easily, right? So there are processes, there are templates out there. You don't have to recreate or create from scratch this certificate, okay? So once you've got your template made and it looks beautiful, here's what needs to be on it. So one, their name, their participant's name, spelled the way that it is in the ORO system, and that's Oregon Registry Online. So how do they spell their name? What is the legal spelling of their name so that it's recognized and they get credit for it to count toward their required hours? Okay. Excuse me, name first. Next, date and time. What is the date? What is the time? You know, May 3rd, 6 to 9 p.m., 2024, right? Next, what is the title? What is the full title of this class? Now, ideally, your title will have a nod to what this class is about, right? Empowered, visionary leadership, right? It's understood that, oh, okay, this is a leadership class, and I get a sense of what it might be about, right? In the description is when you can go more in depth to describe what it is that this class covers, right? So you're using keywords that reveal the depth. Is this an introductory, thing participants will learn, or is this something more in depth participants will examine? Is this even more in depth? Participants will examine and design, right? Building from scratch. So that kind of nods toward what set it is, okay? Now here in Oregon, for professional development to count for set 2 or set 3, the leader must be a master trainer through OCCD. So reach out to me separately and I can help connect you with the people who can help you get your master training status if you want to, right? But you can create a set 1 class with a certificate that has all of this on it, and you're golden, right? So your description nods to, okay, what kind of core knowledge categories are we talking about? Is this around diversity? Is this around health and safety? Is this around family and community systems? Is this about understanding and guiding behavior? What core knowledge category does it address? Weave that in to your description, right? Then you'll add what age group is addressed. Is it infant, toddler, preschool, school age? No group, no age content if it's for adults, right? Then on your certificate, also write what core knowledge category is it? Is it 1 hour understanding guiding behavior, 1 hour family and community systems, or 3 hours special needs, 1 hour diversity, right? Whatever is the focus and the core knowledge focus of your workshop, determine what that is, okay? And you could find a list of core knowledge categories on the OCCD website and other places too. Okay, also on your certificate, put a place for the trainer's name and a place for the trainer to sign it, right? So put your name and a place for your signature, right? Who put it on? Was it your school? Okay, cool. If so, put your school's logo on there, right? That's a lot. So there you go. So hopefully you've got this down and you've got some ideas of what kind of professional development you want to put on in the next little bit. And now you know what to put on the certificate to submit for credit. Okay, so why even bother? Amy, it seems like so much work and I'm already full to my eyeballs with things that I need to do. Why even bother? Can I just hire somebody to come in and do it? Sure, it's how I make my living. But if you, as the leader, step into a role of teaching and guiding alongside role modeling, how powerful is that, right? Is there somebody on your team who wants to step into the role of mentor? Can you coach and build some leadership skills alongside that person so that perhaps that person who has deep skill and knowledge around a particular area, so that they can create a professional development where others learn and grow and are inspired by them, right? Do you have somebody on your team who has some special gardening skills? Can they lead an experience for the team who may be lagging in those skills? Maybe. So you can take a look at your team, and whether it's you or somebody on your team, one, remember it's important to recognize, appreciate, and to compensate when you're inviting people on your team to step into that role of leading to that level. So that's just a little tip from me. I encourage that. Okay. But for you, it might be part of what it is that is expected for you in your role as a leader of a school or a program. Okay. So yeah, why even bother? Seems like so much work. Another reason to bother is so that you can address some places that might be the struggle. It may be that it's taking a whole lot of your time to coach and observe and to step in and help when the teacher or the assistant teacher, the team in the classroom doesn't have the skill to manage that behavior or manage this conversation or manage that relationship with their co-teacher or their assistant teacher or their lead teacher. So investing in that training, in that professional development, will actually save you time and will deepen the relationships between the people on your team. So consider it as putting like money in the bank. Bother now so that the bother doesn't continue and radiate on and on, right? Okay. So you may feel like this. Seriously, some days I just want to reply to emails with okay and a photo of me with my hand on my forehead and tears streaming down my face. Okay, sure, fine, I'm okay. All right. Sometimes we feel like this, right? Am I right? Have you ever felt like that? So if you find yourself feeling overwhelmed by the sheer amount of content we covered in this particular series, episode of the series, pause. Don't stick it in that stack, right? But keep it close and give yourself a reasonable amount of time to percolate on all of this, to reach out to your square squad, to your people that are close by to you and say, hey, help me develop this. Let's do this together, right? So it's not all on your shoulders. Give yourself some time to set aside to make those observations happen, right? Give yourself some grace and set those times to have those coaching conversations, to do the observation, to give the feedback. And invest in the time for rounding. I'm telling you, it's like a golden ticket right there. Okay, so that's all for this episode. Thank you so much for joining me. Next up is session 4, and I can't wait for us to get into that. So until next time, have a great one. Take care.